Hi, folks. Thank you for joining me for a session on value stream mapping. I'm hoping to answer a bunch of questions around value stream mapping, whether you are curious or never heard of it before, and wondering why something like this would be valuable in a development context. So we're going to go in a tight 20 minutes over who, what, where, when, why, how, the whole gamut. And I like to dig into a bunch of detail, but we don't have a lot of time. So if you're curious about more, I'm going to include a link at the very end for a ton more material so you can dive in deeper where you find value or where you're curious. So I'm going to start out with a example to establish some context. In an enterprise, this is a Fortune 100 environment. It's quite common to find that developers are only able to deliver value a very small portion of their time, right? There's a lot of waste, a lot of waiting going on in these highly complex legacy environments. And it's not always apparent, right? We can't always see it. We can feel it, but we can't always see it across the organization. We can't see it when it's affecting other people. And there's very few ways of us collecting data and bringing visibility to that problem. And it's even outside of large enterprises, this is something that happens everywhere. So the industry average is about 15%. And that's 15% of your time being dedicated towards actually creating value. And when we think of how much is between that 15% and 100%, which we're never going to get to, but we should be able to get to 50, 60, maybe even 70% of our time dedicated to creating value and delivering that to our customers. That's the goal. That's why we're all here. So I'm going to share a little bit about what goes into going from 15% to these higher numbers where we're more focused on delivering value on a more consistent basis. So what are the things that we're fighting with here? When we look at that 2.5%, we look at 15%, what's really getting in our way and holding us back from higher levels of productivity and value creation? And it may not surprise you, but it may surprise you that it's not tools. A lot of these problems come from the people and the process side of software development, the complexity that's involved, all the moving pieces, but also the process that we need to layer on top of this to get consistency, standardization, predictability, all these things that as we mature and as our organizations tack on the history, we just get bogged down in all of these rituals and meetings and communication barriers and silos, all kinds of stuff that gets in the way. So what can we do about that, right? It's really helped me over the course of my career to start thinking in terms of value streams. And that's where we're going to start the talk, is the idea that combining value, flow, and sustainability together can give us an avenue towards continuous improvement that is focused on improving what we're able to deliver on a regular basis, right? We don't want a sprint where we're hyper productive and then everything sort of falls apart, or we build something that ends up causing us more problems than they solve. And so what we're looking for is a sustainable practice to consistently improve how much value we're delivering to our customers, whether those customers are internal or external. And often when we think about DevOps and what's recently happened with software delivery and development, there's a lot of focus on automation. There's a lot of focus on CI/CD and the pipeline and the pieces of the puzzle that are highly automated, highly consistent, which is fantastic. But we're at a phase now with DevOps and with software development where optimizing for the pieces that are already automated is only going to get us minor improvements. And what we need to do is zoom out a little bit. And if we look at this illustration, what we're really looking for opportunities in is this idea of lead time. So the start to finish big picture of what goes into delivering software value, right? we can focus on a CI/CD pipeline, but we're only going to be impacting a small area of the business. And there's a ton of value that gets hidden in the people and the process and the handoffs and the interactions that are around that CI/CD pipeline. And when we think of the concept of a value stream and lead time and the big picture, in reality, what happens is there's value streams throughout your entire organization. You can start to think of everything that your organization is doing as a value stream. And there's one big one where, the main purpose of the company is to deliver ketchup to people who want ketchup, for instance. But there's many smaller value streams within that big mission that are worth digging into. Things like, how do we hire people? How do we train people? What happens when someone goes on maternity leave? What happens when we buy another company? These are all value streams because they all have inputs and outcomes that are driven by a consistent and repeatable process. And the value in focusing on value streams is that we can look at these processes as things that we can improve consistently, and we can gradually increase the amount of automation that's involved and get more value, more consistency, and more confidence out of what we're doing as an organization. So think of an organization in terms of multiple value streams interacting with each other, and this starts to get pretty complex, but without visualizing it and without measuring what's going on, we're just victim to the complexity instead of able to optimize and manage it. So at a high level, a value stream and a value stream map starts to give us information about where we are as an organization, right? What are our surroundings? Just like a normal map, right? What are we surrounded by so that we can make good decisions on where should we go from where we're at, right? A map should tell you, where are the cliffs? Where's the river? Where are the peaks and valleys that are going to affect our ability to get from where we are to where we want to go? And a value stream map basically gives you the exact same information. It's going to give you information about what's going on in terms of your processes in your business and indications on how you should tackle specific problems that are between you and where you want to go. And this can start to inform our efforts on how we get to where we're going. So efforts in improvement, training, automation, everything that we want to do to really raise the bar and get to better can be informed by this value stream map that's pointing out, here's where you're weakest. Here's where you're spending most of your time. Here's where all your complexity is. There's a lot of information in there, and we'll dig into that as we go through. I'm going to take you through step by step. So why is value stream mapping a valuable practice in 2020? We've really reached a point with software development and with product delivery that is extremely complex. There's a lot of moving pieces. We have platforms that are incredibly complex, that are capable of deploying and managing software around the globe at a moment's notice to scale up and down and out and recover from failures. We can deliver any kind of product and any experience across a variety of devices. There's tons of complexity going on. And we really haven't developed a lot of tooling and techniques to address that situation of complexity. So we need good ways of looking at what's really happening and making confident decisions on what to do next. And a value stream map is an extremely powerful way of doing that in a very short amount of time with a minimal investment. And I'll show you what goes into this. So where does it come from? Value stream mapping has actually been around for ages. It's been around since we had traditional manufacturing running the show before software was a big deal. And this was a way of having complex manufacturing visualize, measure, and manage the complexity involved in taking a bunch of raw materials and then delivering value to customers at the other end. And by visualizing the entire value stream, they could see our shipping process is taking up tons of time. Or we have people who are moving around the factory And we really should be reorganizing around the people so that there's less motion and disruption going on. Or it's literal handoffs from one person to another. And we find a lot of parallels in software, but you can't really just port this practice from legacy manufacturing into software. As you can see, it's extremely complex. It's not very easy for anyone in the organization to read and understand this. It's really focused on a very niche segment of the population that's been trained in performance optimization in a traditional factory setting. You'll see there's trucks, there's all kinds of lightning bolts and things going on here that add value, but it's a diminishing return situation, right? There is core value in a value stream in the form of a few basic building blocks that I'm going to share. And we can forget about everything else until we've covered the bases and we want to dig deeper. And that's kind of the process that I'm going to share with you now. So where do we really start with all this? In essence, a value stream map starts with a sequence of events. Everything that's involved in delivering value to customers, right? So we go step by step through the process. Basically, it's often me with a group of people facilitating. And I come in from outside and I say to the team, okay, we're going to look at software delivery. How does this start? Does it start with a request from customers? Does it start with pulling something out of a backlog? We pick a starting point and we pick an end point, which is usually people are using this product in production and getting value out of it, or they're giving us feedback about what it's like to use it in the real world. And then we go through every single step in between. So you might have seen something like this pretty often, right? Every process map, every flow diagram looks like this. The difference between a traditional process diagram and a value stream map is this piece right here, where we get into the timing. The step time and the wait time between the steps is where we start to get tons of value from a value stream map. And if we dig really into the functional pieces here, you'll see that I can highlight specific places where we have a lot of time spent. And that's where we start to get a lot of value out of what's going on, really. You know, we can look at a discovery process of 2 weeks. Maybe it's great to have 2 weeks to spend on discovery, right? We can start to really frame a lot of value in exploring what the real problem is, who are our customers, but waiting 5 days between discovery and deciding on whether we go or don't go with this solution, that seems like an opportunity to investigate whether there's waste there, right? And this is the sort of thing that starts to pop up when we look at the value stream. So here's an example of a zoom of the total value stream here. This is an example from one of my early clients. It's a pretty simple case, but you'll start to see that there's areas that start to pop out. You know, you're seeing a lot of red clustered in specific areas. There's some question marks at the end where we don't really know what happens. And that's kind of the value that we get right away from building out the value stream map. And when I say right away, there's usually about a 20% improvement that we can get just by visualizing a current state. So just by illustrating what we're doing right now, things start to appear and inform what we can do to make things better. And here's an example of sort of blocking out these areas of the value stream where we see opportunities. And then we can dig in and we can start to say, okay, well, is it necessary that we wait 2 weeks between all these steps? What goes on? Why is it 2 weeks, right? And this can inform our next steps instead of taking a guess at what we should focus on. And in terms of additional detail, we can really dig deeper as we outline these areas. And let's say we want some more detail to figure out what roles are involved. You know, what kind of tooling are we using? Maybe the tools are the bottleneck. Maybe it's the fact that we're handing off between departments. And we can go beyond that to even dig into value and the idea that how much of the time spent in each step is actually producing value, right? Are we creating a document that no one ever looks at and it's a very low value? Or are we creating brand new intellectual property for the company? And, you know, 100% of this step is dedicated towards that action, in which case that'd be a very high value activity. You know, a meeting without any outcomes or action items is a very low value activity, right? So we can start to think in terms of value, and that can inform how we go from a current state to a future state that's even more valuable. The other piece that we can highlight is quality. This idea that, when we start out the process, maybe we have very low value, but we can start it in the right direction and focus on a very high quality output from each of these steps, so that by the time it gets to the customer, it's an extremely high quality outcome. And so we can look at, okay, well, when I get the definition for a task that I need to complete, does it give me enough information that I can create a very high quality outcome? And if not, then the accuracy and the completion of what I'm getting maybe needs to be improved so that I have higher odds of creating something valuable and complete and accurate by the time it leaves me and goes on to the next step. So what kind of things can we fix by looking at a value stream map? There's all of the wait time is the really low-hanging fruit. It just pops out, and these are very easy things to solve typically. But they could be complex if we're going across the organization to a completely different silo. These are things that we want to look at, and that's where the roles and the handoffs become very valuable. But we can highlight things like things we're doing manually. Maybe there's things that we can automate. Maybe we're looking at single points of failure. So we have a single individual in the value stream who's responsible for a specific piece. And if they're away on vacation or they're sick, everything falls through the cracks. We might not see that if we're not looking at the value stream map. So it becomes very valuable to highlight these things and then illustrate it to different people in the organization, because it's very easy for everybody to understand as long as we keep it simple. So where I see a lot of value in value stream mapping is that it's clear. It's a very clear image that it's very easy to understand. It helps us align through the organization, so everyone from leadership to individual contributors can look at a simple and clear value stream map and understand really what we're talking about. And that helps communication, getting on the same page. Also with team building, there's lots of situations where we're in different departments, we don't talk on a regular basis, but having a clear picture aids the conversation. It makes it easier for us to compare notes and help each other. And then the measurement aspect can't be underemphasized. Having measurement really settles arguments before they start, and it really removes the necessity for interpretation, which can be very hard to move us forward. So really, I would encourage you to start thinking about value, flow, and sustainability in software development in all of the practices that you're performing on a regular basis, because it really just boosts the outcomes of everything that we do. And I want to touch on a couple different pieces before we go. Really, the who of the value stream mapping. Ideally, what we have is sponsors and leadership driving this from a very high level in the organization, because it helps to have a lot of buy-in, a lot of support for this effort. But in the worst case scenario, it can be very valuable to create a value stream map for yourself, right? There can be a lot of gaps, there can be a lot of assumptions, but if you create your own value stream map, you have something to bring other people and say, here's my understanding of the situation. Let me know what I'm missing, or I have this gap in this area that I'm not familiar with. Can you help me fill that out? Can you help me really understand what I'm missing here? And so it can be a great tool, even as an individual, to better your understanding of what's going on in the organization, how you can improve the value that you contribute, and how everything fits together, because as everything gets more and more complex, it's more necessary for us to step away and look at the big picture and then dive in where it most matters. And when should you do a value stream mapping exercise? There's a saying that the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago, but the second best time is today. I would say the same thing about value stream mapping. You can start today and create your understanding of your value stream. And it really will help you communicate, align, and get the best results that you can out of your work. And it can be a great way of stepping away and refocusing your time and energy. What's next for value stream mapping? I think the value stream world is just starting to explode, but we're seeing a lot of tooling, which has a long way to go, but it's getting easier for us to tie all this complexity together and get a better understanding of what's happening. And I'm really excited about that. So stay tuned. I'll share some resources about what I see coming as things develop, but we're still sort of in early days. There's a lot of opportunity for this to grow and become a cornerstone effort, a basic practice that's just part of everything that we do with software development. So I would leave you with a little bit of encouragement about planting trees. Start today. I would say learn more about it. Take a look at what you're doing and what your organization is doing, and it's going to help you deliver more value and raise your confidence in the contribution that you're making and how everything in your organization fits together in the bigger picture. And if you're interested in more, if you have more questions, I would love to have a conversation with you. I'd love to share more information. If you go to visible.is, my website, there is a blog there, there's resources, there's free templates, there's all kinds of extra information. But feel free to reach out to me because I love talking about this. I think there's tons of conversations to be had. There's tons of questions, but thank you very much for joining me for these.